Hey guys, it's Lisa with Are You My Cousin? And it's time for another Facebook or YouTube live stream. I know I've switched it over now. So, welcome. I'm so happy you could join me today for our live stream today. We are going to be talking about those non-population census schedules. And I think you're going to find some really good tips here. I hope you have found the blog post helpful, and it's an underused resource. I think a lot of researchers don't necessarily use. So while we're going to give people just a couple minutes to get in, I'd love it if you would give me a thumbs up or a hello, something just to let me know that you guys are seeing and hearing the live stream well. I always like to see kind of where people are from. I think it's interesting. As we talk, if this is your first time joining me, thank you so much for joining me here. I do try to show up every Thursday, and this is kind of a new thing for us, for me, I should say, because this is only my second week doing it on YouTube as opposed to on Facebook. And I made that change because I have readers who are not actually on Facebook but are more likely. They said they were more likely to watch on YouTube. And because I put everything on YouTube anyway, it seemed I could just make that shift natural. Hey, Barb. Oh, all the way from Alberta, Canada. Yay. And hey, hello. Thanks, Kathy. Thanks, guys, for letting me know that you guys can see me. Now, guys, as we talk, if you have a comment you want to leave, feel free to put that over there. I absolutely see those as they go by, and I'll stop periodically to answer questions or share the comments. I do go ahead and share the comments out loud. I know you guys can read them, but a lot of times on the replay, sometimes folks don't see those comments. So I will kind of re-ask the questions. If you are watching on a replay, if you're not watching this live, just know that any of the links that we talk about, or if I mention putting a link in the comment, then you will find them in the description below for the replay. So they're down in the description under the video. So just look down there for them. But I'll make sure that you have what you need when it comes to finding those links later on. So, hey, pressing my way. Hey, Danya, so nice to see you. So glad that you're here. I'm going to go ahead and put in the chat. This is the link for the post that I updated this week on population schedules for the census records. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about today. This is a post I wrote, probably a year or two ago, maybe. And but I went back in and updated it a lot. So if you read it back then, definitely go back and read it again because it's got a lot of new stuff in there, as well as if you've not seen it before, I'd love for you to hop over and see that. Now, one of the reasons I wanted to talk about the non-population schedules is they have an incredible amount of information in there about our ancestors individually, but also about the social history around the time period our ancestors were living. And so I want to share a little bit about that too, because social history is such an important part of your research. And if you're not including it in your research, you may be missing out on clues to help break down some brick walls. So just wanted to let you know. Hey, Tiara, so glad you could join us. Now, Tiara, we were actually at Roots Tech together back in February. That seems so long ago. Okay, so let's just jump in here. Non-population schedules. So if you're not sure what they are, they were special kind of schedules that were taken along beside the population census back during the years for 1850 through 1880. And it was a way for the government to understand more about the population and to help them decide as far as, money allegations and what types of public health issues might be needed out there, what kinds of monies might be needed for that. So it was a way to get a look to understand more about the population and some of the needs that are out there. So that's kind of the general reason as to why they were included. And for us as researchers, it is a very good thing because there were 6 of them that were done. Now, the 6th one, which is called social statistics, we don't typically use that in genealogy research. It's a lot of statistics. It really doesn't have any bearing on our genealogy research, other than if you really want to kind of get in and get a general sense of an area or the country, you can get in and look at the statistics, but you're not going to find genealogical relevant information there. So you don't really need to worry about that one. But there was the agricultural census, which if you have farming ancestors, that's a good one. We'll talk about that more. the manufactural industrial schedule. So if you had ancestors who were in the manufacturing business, if they were industrial type things, you will find them listed there. There was, and these are not my words. These were the words of the census census.gov now, but the Census Department back then. Is the defective, dependent, and delinquent schedule. Definitely not the terms that we would use today, but we're going to talk about that one a lot in just a minute because there's some really interesting things you can find there. There's the mortality schedule. There is the slave schedule. Now, I'm not going to talk too much about the slave schedule today because that's actually kind of another whole topic in itself, and I'll probably do another YouTube video on that. But just the thing to know about that is it does not list out the enslaved person's name. Unfortunately, it has gender, and it has ages, and it has the owners of the farms or plantations, but it does not name the enslaved person individually. So that's a whole nother specialized one that I really want to address in a different YouTube video. So just watch for an upcoming one on that one. I'd appreciate it. Oh, hey, Debbie, glad you're here. So here we go. Agricultural census, or agricultural schedule, sometimes called the agricultural census. If you had a farming ancestor, this is a great place to look for them because they will be in the population census. But what you can do with those farming individuals is that you will see a bit more about their farm. So you can see how much land they owned. You can see how much of the land that they owned, was it useful in agricultural and producing, or was it basically fallow? So you can kind of see, was their land good? Was it kind of so-so? Maybe they had a lot of land, but maybe not so much of it was used for farming for whatever reason. So you can get an idea there. You learn about the value for that time period. You learn about the value of the land. Now, here's something really interesting. Because the agricultural schedule was taken, 1850 up through the 1860 census time period, it crossed the time period of the Civil War. My ancestor, who I have so many that were in Virginia and North Carolina. So when I look at the agricultural schedule for my ancestor in Virginia in 1850, I can see that value. I can see what the value of their land was in 1860. And by 1870, I can see what the effects of the war have done on the value of properties for not just my ancestor, but for the entire region. So it's an interesting way to kind of get an idea of what was happening there. And I can see effects of what they were growing, what they were no longer growing. Were they in livestock? Were they not? So it's an interesting way to kind of see how the changes in their farming practices across a wartime and just over years. So that's an interesting thing to find there. But you can also see maybe they were more into farming crops. So you'll see the types of crops that they grew. Maybe they were more into cattle or livestock, so you can see what they had. Now I can tell you, because I have so many Virginia and North Carolina ancestors, you know that tobacco was a big crop for my guys, definitely. So, but it gives you that idea. It also helps you to kind of get an idea of who were the large farmers in the area. Who are the large landowners? Now you can actually pick that up sometimes from the census record if the census population schedule is covering values of land or values of real estate. You can pick it up there. But in the agricultural schedule, you can look and see very quickly who were the large landowners. Now, I'll tell you why this is important. Maybe your ancestor did not own land, but they were rural and they were farmers. Maybe they worked on other people's farms, and that's how they made their living, and that's how they supported their family. Well, if you know who the large landowners were in a particular area, you may want to research out those large landowners because your ancestors could be in part of some of the business papers. Maybe they were named as accounts or things like that. So you might be able to find some evidence of where your ancestors were or what they were doing during that time period when they didn't own land. So that's an interesting way to kind of use that type of get that information from an agricultural schedule. So absolutely, you want to check that out if you had those farming ancestors. Now, another one that really piqued my interest, and this is really kind of when I was a younger researcher, when I was researching earlier on and really just kind of learning about the special schedules, these non-population schedules. There was one in particular that really piqued my interest from a personal reason, and it was the defective, dependent, and delinquent schedule. Oftentimes, it's just, you'll see it abbreviated the DDD. So if you see that, that's what it's referring to. Now, the reason I was interested in this is because in the 1880 regular population census, my great-great-grandmother is listed. But when you really read all the details, she was listed and she was checked off and indicated that she was insane. Now, again, that is the words that were being used at the time. It is certainly not my words. So when I saw that, I really wanted to know more about her. I really wanted to tell Panthea's story. And so I started trying to delve into it. And that's when I came across the DDD schedule. And in that, there was the schedule for the mental institutions. And she was actually in a mental institution, and she's on that list. And so in that, on the DDD, where they've listed her for that county as being insane, it talks about what type of mental illness she had, which was basically undetermined. They did not know. It gave her age. It said how long she had been ill. It talked about when it started. Had she had other instances? Was she at home? Was she in a state institution? Which unfortunately she was. It indicated who paid, whether it was the county paying or the family paying for that hospitalization, how long she was there, and also, and this is, it was, did she need physical restraints? So there was it was, I'll be honest, it's a little tough to read when you're reading about your ancestor and knowing kind of where mental health might have been at that time period. But putting the pieces together for Panthea to put her schedule to her story together and the timing of it, as well as what I knew about from the population census, is that she went in very shortly after her youngest child was born. It was the only time she'd ever had an issue, but for whatever reason, it was severe enough that she spent a year in a mental institute. She actually died shortly coming out shortly thereafter. What we actually think, and putting those pieces together, is that it very well could have had some type of postpartum depression or postpartum type of incidents if something happened during childbirth. So it's a very sad story, actually, to learn about Panthea and to be able to put those pieces together. Now, I am fortunate enough, I think I will be able to access some of those records that are still available because of she's in a different state than where I live now, and they have a little more open policy to seeing those. But again, these are clues to her story that I pulled from that DDD schedule. So it's an interesting story, and it's an interesting thing to look at and see how society handled that. All right, hang on, I got some comments. Let me peek at those. Hey, Debbie, so I'm glad you can find it. Sorry you had a hard time finding it this time. Yay, we have Terry, yay, so glad you're here from Arizona. And Debbie said she had no idea you could find that information. Yes, there's a tremendous amount of information that you can find on those. It's hard to read. Also, under the DDD schedule, they had different sections under it. You can also find the poorhouse and the pauper list. So, for instance, in 1870, my ancestor was living. He's listed on the population schedule as living with his son, and he was in 1870 in Halifax County, Virginia. But he's also listed on the paupers list. And so I found him there. And basically it says he was, the cause of his, it was just old age, and he had some senility going on, and that he was living in his son's home. So he was receiving government money or county money to be supported, but he didn't have to be in a home. He was in his son's home. So you can see a listing there of people who were on the paupers list, as opposed to if you had ancestors who might have been poor or who had no means, who were being supported in the actual poor house. You can find that listed as well. Again, it doesn't necessarily give you more information on progressing that line back, but it tells you about their life. It gives you some indication of what they were like. So it was kind of in my case, finding my fourth great grandfather on that paupers list is the fact that he came from two very well-off, wealthy, dare I say, almost Virginian type royalty families, two large families, to wealthy and well-known families, prominent families, and he literally died while he was on the paupers list. So it's an interest. There's stories there, obviously, and you better believe I've gone after those stories. So, hey, Lily, so good you're here. So check those lists out to see what else could be there. Not just that they were listed, but what does being on that list tell you about that ancestor? Now, the mortality schedule. I think of all the schedules, the agricultural and the mortality schedule are probably the ones that we as genealogy researchers are the most used to. So the mortality schedule is a really fantastic substitute when we maybe cannot find a death date for an ancestor. Maybe, one of the ways we might check for a death record or a death date would be to look for a will or an estate record. But what about when those county records maybe were lost? Maybe the courthouse burned, and so you have a burned county and those records were lost. Maybe there was a flood. Maybe for whatever reason, they just got lost. It happens. It absolutely happens. And so you're struggling to find that death date. Maybe you can't, maybe there is no tombstone. Maybe you don't know where they were living. Well, the mortality schedule can actually help you out because it was taken, and what it did is it named the individuals who had died within 12 months of that census date. So if the date for whatever the date was for the 1880 census, so maybe say May 31st, and to be honest, guys, I can't remember off the top of my head. I always have to look those dates up. So it would be the 12 months before that. So not just 1870, or 1879, it would have been the 12 months preceding the date that the population census was to be taken. So that is a good place to find record of a death. Now, granted, it's not everybody you're going to find, but if they died within those 12 months, they should be listed. And the other thing is it tells you why they died, and it might tell you how old they were. The amount of information will vary depending on which year you're looking at. But one of the examples I used in the blog post, and I'd love for you to go over and check it out, is because it gave a lot of information. It gave the person's name, it gave their age, it gave why they died. It told you what month somebody died in. So it might not tell you, you're probably not going to get a specific date for that death date, and that's okay. But if they give you a month, then you have a month and a year, and sometimes that's as close as you're going to get, and that's okay, and that's a good data point for you. So they're going to tell you their age, so you can then infer a birth date from that. One of the ones I looked at asked for how long they had lived in that particular county that they were in. And so if you see that they spent their entire life there, that's great. That simplifies your research a bit for them. But maybe it was a 50-year-old man and they'd only been in the county 5 years. Well, that gives you a range for your research. It can help you. That if you're researching that gentleman in your 10 years prior to his death, you don't need to be searching in that county. You need to determine where he came from. I've even seen it where it listed where the parents were born. A tremendous amount of information there. So make sure you're going into those original records or into those records so that you can see everything that's listed there. You guys have heard me, if you've heard me talk at all, I always talk about when you're reading these records, make sure you're reading every single detail. When you're on a census record, whether you're on a non-population schedule, read every single column and understand what it says. One of the interesting things that I found just reading the mortality schedules as I was doing research for that article was how interesting it was to see who was listed in that. And it was really, it was not so fun to read when you see literally the number of young and small children who were dying, and then also you could see when waves of illness would hit, like the influenza would hit, and you could see that, or you would see when the measles were hitting a certain area. It was kind of an interesting social history piece to look at. So I kind of enjoyed looking at that. It gave me a better perspective on my ancestors and what it might have been to live like through a flu season when you don't have a flu vaccine type thing. So take a look at that and see what you think there. So hang on, I got some comments coming through. Again, guys, if you have found anything really interesting on a non-population schedule, drop it in the comments because I'd love to hear and love to be able to share that with other listeners. Hey, Barb, so you said your great-grandparents were from Germany. You have and you have one document. Any suggestions on how to read documents in German? Some are not very clear. Yeah, so Barb brings up a good thing. So she's looking at some German records for her ancestor. She's not able to read the German. It's not very clear. When it comes to reading documents that were from in a different language like that, sometimes it helps to have kind of a general genealogy word list. So if you're looking at, say, birth records or death records, things like that, you can recognize certain names. And if you just Google, German genealogy word list, then you can find some common words that way. If it's a full-on German kind of written in a will that you need to have a German background for, you need to understand German or whatever language, then you're going to need to probably seek out somebody who can do a translation for you. And there are genealogists out there who specialize in languages as well. Some are not very clear. Okay, you're probably, the ones that are not clear, you're probably going to need somebody who's used to researching German genealogy to look at them, because they'll be able to infer the words a little bit better than you can coming at it cold. Lily says, were mortality schedules for your county or state? They are actually not for every single state. So these were federal records. So it's going to be with the federal census records. So it's not going to be your county didn't necessarily do one. Although I say that, it is possible your county may have done something similar or have lists of people you might want to check with your county. But the ones I'm talking about are particularly their federal records. They are done by the state, or they're organized by state and county through the federal census. So therefore they are federal records and not at the county level. I think that makes sense. So it's only from 1850 to 1880. Obviously, if the statehoods came in after 1880, they would not be have that done as well. And if you go to census.gov, and I'm going to put this, let me put this in the link in the comments for you. So census.gov, if you have any questions about census records, about the non-population schedules, the census.gov site has a wonderful history section on there, and that's the one I'm linking to. And I would encourage you to go there, and you can learn about the various history. So if you have a question about what was asked, about which states were covered, which were not covered, absolutely you want to head over to census.gov, and it's /history. So, but the link is there. And again, if you're watching on the replay, I'll pop that into the description below. It's a great place. This is where I go when I have any questions about census research or non-population schedule research. It's a good place to see what they were asking, why they were asking questions, what they might have, any small variants that might have occurred from year to year or for a certain location type thing. Oh, you're welcome, Barb. The other thing that I would encourage you to do, and this is a great tip, guys, whether you're doing just general census work or, again, these non-populations, is to have a blank chart by your side when you do that. And I'm going to get you a copy. Now, I usually pull mine from the National Archives site, the NARA site, which is a good place. Okay, and I just popped the link into the comments for you there. When you have a copy of a blank chart, then you can makes reading your census records easier, or your non-population schedules easier. We all know that you get to those records and you find your ancestor on the agricultural census. Well, there were some very tiny columns on that census, on that non-population schedule, that agricultural schedule, and they're hard to read. And it's then it's been microfilmed and digitized and uploaded, and it's almost impossible to read some of those columns depending on the condition of the record. But if you have a blank copy beside you, then you can compare, and it's much easier and much quicker. So actually what I do is I just went in years ago, and I printed off blank copies of forms for all the census years as well as the non-population schedules. And I just have a package of them, and when I'm researching, I just pull off the one I need, and I've got it right there ready to go. Just keeps me moving forward without sitting and wasting time trying to figure out what something reads when it's quite easy to find out. So yeah, so that's a really good tip to do. All right, guys, if you found something fun in the those non-population schedules, pop it in the comments. We're going to wrap up pretty soon here. But I really wanted to share this with you today, and really wanted to encourage you to check out the non-population schedules. Oh, where you can find these. You can find these on the major genealogy databases. Ancestry has them. So it's real easy to find, to search those as well. So I would encourage you to check those out. Now, Sherry says, prison schedules. Yes, the prison schedules are there. She found her husband's great uncle and then his sister in a hospital schedule where she was a nurse treating malaria, what you think were malaria victims. Absolutely. So in that DDD schedule, it actually has several sections. I can't remember the exact number, 6 or 7 sections. So one would have been for the mental hospitals, like for the insane category. Again, their terms, please, not my terms. But there was also one for prisons and inmates, so you could find the prison schedule. That's another really fascinating thing. And here's a tip. When you find them on that prison schedule, think to yourself, can I find out more? What else could I potentially find the prison record? Could you potentially find that jail record? Now, different states have different privacy laws, so you may or may not be able to find those, but go after it. Don't just stop with the information you find on those schedules. Think, is there another record? Does this tell me I could check out a different record and see what you can find? And yes, the hospital schedules, that's an interesting one too, that you think she was treating malaria. And again, when you find your ancestor on, say, a hospital schedule, whether they're in a mental institute or whatever facility that they might be in, and you get that name, go ahead and take it a step further and research the name, research that particular hospital. So for instance, I know which mental institution my great-great-grandmother was at, my third great-grandmother, I've lost track, was in. And so I can research that. I've seen photographs of it. I've gotten the history of it. And so it was a really interesting thing to learn, again, to be able to see what she saw. It adds perspective and color to her story. So yeah, thanks, Sherry, for sharing that. Oh, so Kathy says, Ohio has township schedules in the county records. That's a good thing. Yes, that's nice to know, Kathy. Thank you for sharing that. I was thinking that some of the, there were some states that had some, or counties had some records like that, but I haven't used those as much. It's something I really probably should get into. Debbie said the word sanatorium was used in the early 1900s. Yes. And that's another thing. You do have to kind of watch your terminology. It does change throughout the history. It was really, I try to be very careful with that because thankfully it has changed over time. But it's an interesting thought process. Oh, your grandmother was a nurse and graduated in 1907. Yes. Oh, nursing's changed a lot since then for a lot of folks, definitely. But a wonderful profession. So, okay, guys. So that's all I have for today. Definitely, if you get a chance, check out the post. Love for it if you'd share it with your friends, if you have genealogy friends you think would find that interesting. And check out the other YouTube videos. I do try to put out videos twice a week, so check those out. You're welcome to, and guys, share them if you like. If you find you like them, share them, or subscribe to the channel, and that way you know when new ones come out and you don't have to keep checking back. So anyway, again, if you are watching this on a replay, no worries. Check out any of the things that I mentioned. I will have them in the description below for you today. So go have a great day, guys, and happy ancestor hunting. All right, bye-bye.